did a really great article essentially about the demise of...
The 4 sweetest letters in the English language, PSVR, and a number as well. 2 mean a hell of a lot less today than they did many moons ago. It seems like Sony are cleaving the system off their shelves.
It's absolutely tragic, Scott Tilford. It's not been a good day for old JB. The England team put in a middling performance, and I wake up to an article that tells me the PSVR is dead. This comes by way of Android Central, who put out a great little article looking into the demise of PSVR 2, because it feels like the writing has been on the wall for a little while. A few months ago, we talked about a report from Bloomberg that said essentially that Sony was halting production, or at least trying to wind it down. But from sources close to Android Central, essentially, they're just not investing in VR at all, at least on a first-party front. In the article, they say, quote, "Some sources close to Android Central have revealed that Sony is making deep cuts to funding for VR games. While I'll paraphrase for anonymity, my source was told that there will be very few opportunities for VR game development at Sony going forward." The report goes on to say that currently there are only 2 games in development at all, which obviously does not bode well for the console. That on its own would be damning enough, Scott Tilford, but there is something in this article that's mentioned that I did not think about, and truth be told, didn't even know was a thing, because they later go on to say that, quote, "In January 2022, Sony executives were said to be focusing on a hybrid AAA strategy, meaning AAA games like Horizon, Uncharted, The Last of Us, Spider-Man, and potentially other Sony games could see a VR mode launch alongside the regular version of the game. In the case of Resident Evil 8 Village and Resident Evil 4 Remake, the VR version came just a few months after the TV version launched." And then they go on to say, "But other than Gran Turismo 7, we haven't seen or heard of any other hybrid AAA games from any of Sony's studios. If any game should have received the treatment, it was Astro Bot, which is not getting a VR mode at all," end quote. And that to me is the writing on the wall, because Astro Bot, as we have discussed many times, was the crown and the jewel of the original PSVR. He was in fact, if I recall, the highest rated game, Astro Bot's Rescue Mission, on the platform, and one of the highest rated PS4 games just in general. The fact that we aren't even getting a VR compatibility mode for a character who started as a VR icon, that to me indicates that they are just done with the platform.
I always thought the money on if they want a bunch of money, just let us play as Spider-Man. How have you not done Spider-Man VR? Just let me leap off a building and catch myself with a web and fly through New York. You have the city already rendered. You have the tech. It's right there. They did a version of it back when the second Spider-Man movie came out, the Tom Holland one, and they had a tech demo that launched alongside that movie where you could start to swing around the city. It was very arbitrary and whatever, and maybe it made too many people sick. I have no idea, but I don't know why they didn't chase that more.
Yeah.
Of all the all the second party, I guess. No, it is first party, but Marvel, obviously, Spider-Man, whatever. Of all the properties that they have access to, why do they not chase the literally let you be Spider-Man idea? The fact they didn't go down that route is weird. Also, the most recent state of play that we had showcased quite a lot of PSVR 2 games, and some that looked quite promising. But maybe that's just the end of the run as it is right now.
I think it's more a case of them getting out of the first-party support. I mean, this isn't exclusive to PSVR 2. I mean, Sony is so bad at giving first-party support to anything that isn't just a main console release. I mean, look at your beloved Vita for the demise of that approach. So what we're seeing now is kind of an attempt to keep PSVR 2 alive, but with third-party support. They announced very recently that they are releasing an adapter that Android Central always talks about to make it compatible, the PSVR 2 system, with PC VR, which makes more sense. Will hopefully give it a bigger audience and get more players on these games. You know, even at launch, the biggest titles were hotly anticipated ports like Pavlov, which moved to Unreal Engine 5, which debuted on PSVR 2. You had stuff like Pistol Whip, eventually Beat Saber, and the likes. These really great games that a lot of them were on the original PSVR, but were hamstrung by the technical limitations and were back better than ever. We, of course, did have Horizon Call of the Mountain, which was released as a launch game. I thought it was pretty good, but Firesprite, the team that made that title, is one of the Sony studios that has been hit with layoffs. That was actually confirmed by the studio just the other day, in fact, after it was reported earlier this year. They shut down London studio, which, while known for the getaway on PlayStation 2, recently had created VR experiences like PSVR Worlds and Blood and Truth, which was absolutely incredible. I would have loved to have seen a follow-up to that. So with those layoffs in mind, with the lack of this hybrid model, which makes sense in hindsight, because of course we got, the VR versions of Resi 8 and Resi 4 are outstanding. So is the GT7 one. But I actually never really thought that was going to lead to more tie-ins, but the fact that that was on the table at one point just makes me think, what could it be?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's always going to be this wider plan stuff. Like, I felt like PSVR 2 in particular, there was just so little marketing for it. Like, we didn't even realize this. You obviously pre-ordered it, or you knew the system was coming out, but I felt like the average gamer or whatever had no idea there was a new bit of kit about to drop. And I don't feel like Sony ever really believed in it. It was just this weird sort of offshoot thing that I wonder how much was related to, Jim Ryan coming in and being like, okay, the tech is kind of in motion when he starts to take over as the head of PlayStation. And maybe he just didn't believe in it, so there's not that much money being put behind the marketing side of things. But either way, it never felt like Sony treated PSVR as a meaningful extension of their identity, which is what I was getting out of the state of play stuff. It's true, obviously, this is about first party, but they're still devoting chunks of their exclusivity, their potential exclusive stream to a bit of kit, to a bit of tech that they're not too bothered about, or they don't seem to be too bothered about. The adapter they've put out on PC also wipes out a lot of the signature features. You can't use the haptics. There's a whole list of stuff that doesn't work if you use the adapter. It actually makes it a worse bit of kit, and it removes the signature elements that could have differentiated it in an already quite packed market in regards to the amount of hardware that's out there for VR. So they just seem to have tried, to kind of half-assed it and gone, it's not working, we're just going to get rid of it.
The annoying thing is that they full-arsed the actual development of the machine, which is great. It's just, I think it's a mixture of a lack of enthusiasm, rightly so, from consumers. It being, I don't think it was overpriced, but it's a hard sell. I know we talked about this before, it being more than a PlayStation 5.
That's crazy.
You needing a PlayStation 5 at a time, especially when those weren't readily available when the PSVR 2 launched, and a lack of new games for the system. Like I said, all you really had was Horizon Call of the Mountain, which was good, but in my opinion, not a system seller. It certainly wasn't a Half-Life Alyx or anything like that. It didn't, the reality it released, I don't think made it an attractive purchase. I bought it because I'm a die-hard VR aficionado. I like to think of myself as one anyway. Yes. And even I'm here like, oh man, I've been sold a dream, even though I've enjoyed it as a third-party machine. And maybe that is just the plan going forward. They will never properly cut support for it in the short term, because they can kind of just sit back, be like, well, we produced it, you can buy it, and we'll take a cut of the third-party games that are sold on the store. But I think that's such a shame, because I really do think that the PSVR, if they committed to the bit, could have maybe sold people on the VR dream. You have so many PlayStation franchises, man.
Yes.
That's what Sony's known for. Why aren't you leveraging those in the same way that something like Half-Life is being leveraged or has been leveraged in the past? Like, that is your killer app. That's what would sell anyone on it, or that's the hope anyway, but they just never want to commit to that much, right?
No, that's the thing I'm so curious about now that when was the original PSVR? That was 2016, 2017?
16, I want to say, yeah.
It's been a while anyway, and PSVR 2, obviously, the last few years. I just wonder, does the average person care about VR as an entity, as a way of experiencing something? I feel like we watched the real-time failure of the Apple Vision Pro, the most deluxe version of this, and obviously you can argue the price point is what put people off that, but do people actually want, en masse, do they want this idea of strapping a TV to your face and interacting with stuff more directly? Is that just something that we are wholesalely rejecting as a populace, as a society, or whatever? Is that just the reality of it? I think so personally, but I'm curious. Does the average person see the viability here as a literal product, as a literal thing you want to spend your time doing?
Yeah.
Because that was always the biggest hurdle that VR had to overcome with me. It wasn't that the VR, once I had it on, wasn't enjoyable. I love Resident Evil 4 or whatever it is, and we got a bunch of VR videos on the channel, which all bombed, by the way. That was another indicator that the average person just doesn't care about VR. But still, once you get the tech on, it's okay, but it doesn't demo very well. And I just wonder, has the average person tried it and gone, it's not for me. I don't feel safe in this thing. Someone's standing behind me and I have no idea. Whatever it is. I just wonder about that. And I wonder if it just is never going to get bigger than the portion of the market it has right now. Because you do have the Vive. Valve has their Vive, and the Oculus is obviously doing incrementally better with better priced kit. And it's obviously more wireless on the Oculus front. But yeah, I just wonder, like, is this as big as VR is going to get? It's fundamentally a niche thing, and it's never going to be bigger than this.
I must admit, like, since I got into PSVR with the PSVR 1, like, I feel like I've joined a cult, but in like a good way, because the people who talk about VR just generally are so passionate about it.
Yeah.
They create such great content. They're so enthusiastic about it. I mean, look at some creators like Miles Dyer over at PSVR Without Parole.
Shut up.
A channel that I religiously check out if I'm looking for reviews of PSVR games. You can see it reflected in the community, in the Reddit threads. People are enthusiastic about this kit when they're able to try it and when they're able to get to grips with it. I think the issue is it's hard to get to grips with a piece of kit that costs $1,000 all in if you already don't own the console, or if you want an upper end version on PC. Like, it's a huge investment, and it is a risk because, as we've said many times before, you can't sell VR by just having trailers or having like show reels or sizzle reels. You need to try it for yourself, and there is a reality where you spend all that money, you try it and go, oh, actually this isn't for me, and I don't like putting this thing on my head. I do think there's enough. I do think it convinces more people than it doesn't when you put it on, just through the enthusiasm and the passion that you see in the fan base. But it's getting that thing on in the first place in good conditions, because you can always try it. I mean, how many times have you tried it at work when we do the VR challenges? But it's different from actually getting to grips with it at home for a substantial amount of time for a full game like Resi Village, you know, because otherwise it can come across as like a bit of a gimmick.
It's definitely that. For me, it never overcame the gimmick stuff. And I have a PSVR 1. I bought one for No Man's Sky because I love the idea of being completely immersed in No Man's Sky. But once I did an afternoon in VR, it just didn't feel right. Like, it was sweaty. I just wanted my vision back. Like, after a while, to me, it never worked for a long time gaming session. But I know that, like, obviously you play games for a long time in VR, and people do in general, and there is an untapped amount of immersion there that just feels incredible. Like Walking Dead Saints and Sinners is awesome. There are experiences out there. It feels like a multi-pronged thing. Like, it's very hard to demo VR in a retail space. Retail spaces are dying anyway, especially when it comes to physical video game spaces. You're sharing a headset that's been used 50 previous times that hour, or whatever the hell it is. There's the price tag side of it. There's the fact that even if you do buy in when you get home, you would then want your library to all support VR, and it doesn't. And then we've just kind of got here where Sony haven't really convinced us that it's worth buying into, and even the people who have bought into, they haven't really supported your decision, like consistently anyway. So it's a weird thing. I feel like I applaud the tech. Like, I'm glad that it exists and the experiences exist, but I just think the weird back and forth. Like, it's this incredible bit of kit, but we're not really going to believe in it. And then it's almost like the writing's been on the wall since launch, like with this thing.
It just makes me not worry about Sony, because like I say, they've been doing this forever with peripherals and add-ons, but I just want them to properly support something for longer than a year going forward. And it feels like that era is kind of just getting further and further away, especially as they focus on like just their big blockbuster franchises and the most blockbuster versions of them with the big single player games or what have you. It is interesting that there was that hybrid approach, because in the Jim Ryan era, which we're kind of getting out of now, that would have meant like a big sequel, say, Ghost of Tsushima 2 with a live service version and also a PSVR version. That is a lot of work, probably too much work for one person, but that would have been an interesting reality. I guess just going back to what you said about like kind of selling you on it. I mean, how many times, man, have I been in this office with you on a video, on a podcast, and I've been trying to sell you on a game that looks like ass. That when you watch on a trailer, it just looks like a game that you've played a million times before, and I've had to be like, no, you don't understand. When you're in, it feels different. It looks so much it feels so much better than it looks. But I mean, who's gonna get the ramblings of a madman like me and go, you know what? I trust you to spend £1,000 on this, so I'm going to do that. Yeah,
if it was a lower price
tough.
tag, I would totally have gone.
Right.
Like, because I do, like, yeah, whenever I've seen the gameplay footage that you've shown me or you've described certain things, I don't know if other people have this with their friends who have bought into VR, where it's like, sick, man, I would love to try that. And then you price it up and go, well, I don't have £1,000 spare or whatever it is. Multiple times I've thought about buying an Oculus, but then there's a whole compatibility thing there where it doesn't support everything I would want to play on there. So I think VR's in a really weird place. And maybe it is just destined to stay as a hobbyist thing, which is completely fine. Like, the market will still support that in terms of the wider third-party stuff. But yeah, you mentioned Vita before. I feel like in regards to Sony's overall attitude to this, once the Vita stopped selling, and they themselves shot it in the foot by having their own proprietary memory cards, which you would then overprice, that was where the whole thing fell down. They just kind of went, oh, we messed it up. Yeah, we can't make it better, so it's just out there and we're going to move on.
Hey, it would be remiss to not mention the fact that Sony clearly made a Square Enix-esque mistake with the projections for the PSVR 2, setting them unrealistically high, I think, considering the price point and the economic situation that thing was even releasing in. Like, that was never going to do that amount that they wanted, so I also worry, this is unsubstantiated, not mentioned in the Android Central report, but I worry that they just set the bar way too high, and then when it came in underneath, just went, well, it didn't meet our expectations, so...
Yeah, I'd be so curious as this all kind of rolls on about the reality, because there's a whole thing about the amount of VR units that were shipped to stores that then didn't sell, that would then had to be recalled or whatever. The literal numbers of how many people bought in, I'm so curious about it, because if you did buy in, you had a phenomenal experience, but they sucked at getting that across to the mainstream for whatever reason, all the reasons that we just listed. But for now, Sony are walking away from another incredible product.
Still gonna go home tonight and embarrass myself fighting Apollo Creed.
Someone needs to.